how many stages, let's say, can each group tell me like whether how many stages you identified in a mediation? You? Three?
Yes.
Did you raise your hand?
We didn't have
Yeah? You just elaborated on it?
the first one we elaborated on.
Okay.
The first was
Okay, hold on. I think we're not ready to share yet. Are we? Ready? You need more time? Okay.
please move
Yeah.
the
Okay.
remediation. We defined the pre-mediation process.
Pre-mediation?
The second one would be the mediation agreement.
Yeah?
And the third one, the proper mediation.
Okay, so those are the three stages. So the pre-mediation, the agreement, and then the mediation in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well,
Three stages. Okay.
we didn't go very far. We didn't go very discussion.
Don't worry.
Okay, it's okay.
You're in
So
good
we
time.
just discussed the first steps, and I think we started with mediation per se, like taking it for granted that pre-mediation would have happened before.
Okay. So what you discussed is that how important the pre-mediation is and the mediation. So those, you see those as two essential steps. Yeah? So it's more, it's like a bigger, like großschrittig, how do I say, biggest.
The
Two big
first step,
steps.
we decided to define the framework, the ground rules
Exactly.
and so on. And then we discussed about the need to build trust between all the parties and listening and building mutual understanding.
In order to
In
engage
order, in order
mediation.
to build a safety place for mediation.
Okay.
We went through all three stages.
Yeah, three stages.
Yeah,
Okay.
Beginning, middle, and final.
Okay.
In the beginning, we would identify the causes of the conflict, the needs and interests of the
Okay, you did an analysis.
position,
Yeah.
setting common ground, and involving actors. In the middle, we would go deeper into negotiate with the parties.
Okay, so then that's the negotiation or the mediation in itself, yeah?
And finding common ground, making parties understand that, making sure that parties understand everything on the same level.
Right.
And then on the final stage, we will draft and sign the
Okay, so it's four actually.
three.
Okay, I identified you analyze.
In the beginning, we set rules
Yeah.
and needs, interests,
Okay.
positions, and yeah.
Okay, I saw that as a distinct stage. Okay, that's three, as you like it. Okay, then you? Who was in the next group? How many stages did you have?
Well, it's quite different, it's not beginning, middle, and final, it's beginning, middle, and end.
Okay. Okay. Did you just know me? You're able.
So at the beginning we have also the ground, to agree on the ground rules, of course,
Yeah.
and also to clarify the whole process and that we are going to go through, especially if there will be some equality caucus.
Right.
Yeah. How do you spell caucus?
Caucus, yeah? But caucus is caucus.
Okay, I'll search on
C-A-R. It would be interesting to explore the connection.
Yeah. And then at the middle, of course, it's to start to share and maybe also to try to analyze the conflicts if we will be using the dynamic conflict analysis tools, and to come up to, of course, especially with the hidden and underlying values and underlying needs. And this will help us to generate the alternatives and generate the different options, and to be able to choose among these what can be a win-win situation for everyone.
Right, so you went into greater detail, and one of the aspects I think that are really important to mention, because I personally think that's the hard piece of mediation, is to finally come to an understanding of the needs and interests of the parties, yeah? To give that space. Okay.
Yeah, and at the end, of course, agreement.
Excellent. So it doesn't sound only 2 steps, it sounds much bigger to me. But
Three.
Three, okay,
And
awesome.
within each step there is a stage. There are
Different stages.
steps. So 3 stages but different steps.
I see, so you subdivide these steps.
Yeah.
I see. Ah, yeah.
Stages and steps.
You just said
Very structured, yeah. This informatician, so.
1A, 1B.
How
I
about
think
you?
I was just going to say I'm even more obsessed with structure.
Okay.
We got up to 7 stages.
Okay, there you go.
And we said 3 to 7, right?
3 to 7.
And how you
Three.
see it. Because,
Okay.
But we think they all kind of can flow into each other. It doesn't have to be so separate. And also from a practice, we have the opening statement of the mediator, which builds rapport and explains the process, sets the ground rules, answers any questions. Then for the parties themselves to have an opening statement to the mediator to have a chance to speak. After that, the mediator can summarize what they've heard, so the main issues that have come up, and maybe even put it on a board so that there's a visual cue.
Connection, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the main stage is the discussion, so where the mediator gives the parties a chance to discuss those issues that have come up and guides their communication. Afterwards, there are possibly private sessions or the caucus as a stage. And after that, it's maybe possible for them to start generating options. That's the option generation stage. And finally, if they have some sort of agreement
And then you
in
said,
mind, then you can help them work towards a conclusion or
okay,
an agreement or
okay,
next steps. to
it's
take.
very
But it doesn't have to be
structured.
okay, we're here.
Yeah, now the thing is, and that's an interesting question because I think you both work as mediators, yeah, well, you as well, right? So how important is it for the parties to know, like me when I said, what stage are we in? Where, for you to communicate what we're doing at the moment. Is it you who you know it and just go along and did parties just trust you or you communicate it?
I think when you mention the art of
Yeah.
mediation is
Yeah.
when it becomes seamless.
Yeah.
So when you sort of even guide them, you say, if they come up with options very early on, you say, well, we can get to that later, but let me park that or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they've had a discussion, you can see it's going around in circles. You can say, well, how about, I feel like it might be time for a break and we'll go to caucus now. And so it's not like saying, okay, now we have to go into the next stage. But it's trying to get this flow happening. And all the stages are designed for a reason, like they're there for a reason. So I think it's
Absolutely.
it is useful to have that.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
I think it's similar to a seminar. I think it's really very good for people to know a little bit what they can expect. Exactly, sort of the process. No, I mean what the stages are, when they will be able to speak, what is hoped to be the final sort of final step, etc. I think that also reassures, no? Sort of gives
See, the
them
thing is
trust in the process.
Absolutely, and that's. Thank you for contrasting that. Sasha and I recently took a group on a boat, yeah, for a 10-day trip. That's the trip or journey. And some people wanted to know where this journey was physically going to, and at which date we're going to be in which port, and what are we going to do, and when is the yoga, and when is the sharing, and when is that. And then the other ones say, oh, we know you, we're just gonna, it's fine, everything is fine, as long as we get, as long as I get on the plane on the last day, it's fine. But it's like a mediation in a way, that people are different. You need to know the needs of the parties, how they tick as well, how secure or insecure they are, how much they trust you, and then maybe once they trust you a little bit more, you don't maybe need to know. But I'm also a person that I like to see the map before I go somewhere. Sometimes it's
From this point of view, in Italy is funny because now the only part that is free is the central part. So negotiating, focusing, and so on. The first part is very structured, and this made free. This can free the parties from compulsory mediation. So they are so attempt to know how far the introduction phase lasts if they don't care about mediation. So as far as they finish it, we can sign, we can go away. Then if they remain, the minority percentage, then they don't really need to. They trust. If they remain, they trust you, and if they trust you, it's like okay. Guy does, but it's funny this division between the introduction phase, where at least 50% of the parties or their lawyers are willing just to know when it's ending, just to sign and go away, and the others.
Okay, but it's nice what you just presented, because it often really goes like this. You build that process in that first critical phase, and you know. So 2 hands here, 1, 2. Yeah.
Yes, a very famous mediator said that with logic you can get from A to B, but with imagination you can go everywhere. And he spoke about very special skills, which is called serendipity. How to feel, how to be very aware of sensitivity or your sharing with people, and to be aware with the unknown situation in order to open. Sometimes if you are seated at the table from A to B, you feel a little bit close, you know, you need to open also the dialogue.
Okay, thank you. Really important point.
In relation to the rules and following the process and the rules, I mean, like, to say it bluntly, we need to know the rules in order to break them, or not to break them, but not to respect them. Okay. So in the initial phases, it's better to follow, I think, not to be obsessed, but it is necessary, at least for me, to follow step by step.
Right. As the mediator, you
as the mediator, or as the trainer, because I have got that role also. When we're training teachers to become mediators, then we have really great problems, because they insist on phases. Wait, you're now in this phase, you're not in that part. Okay, try to relax and to concentrate on generating options and so on. So maybe even if you have some advice in relation to that, but that is through practice actually, that's the only way. Once you learn how to drive, then you drive, I think.
Absolutely.
It could be compared with that. But how to explain to participants not to worry too much, but to try out.
I mean, especially when you teach mediation, you know, or you're trying to build the capacity of others to become mediators, is that I think there is a great need for security first, you know, and structures and rules and things like this that you can hang on to. But you know, as you said, you know, the practice will make you more relaxed about it. Yeah?
But does that mean you really start with the structure also in the first mediation conversation again, like as a mediator? Because there's a lot of tension and excitement and all things going on an emotional level. What do? You start like, well, here we are, and this is the structure, or how do you do that?
Yes, definitely, yes. We explain ground rules and the whole process and what is the role. First of all, who am I and what is the role of mediators and what kind of structure we suggest. We can only suggest,
Right. Just to allow you to share before we stretch out, because some people get tired as well, now physically also. Just maybe if you want to share, there's 2 more groups, 2 more groups. Stages?
Yeah, so it's similar to what Alex was saying. I mean, we've got a 5-stage process.
5 stage?
So we have an introductory stage, which we were talking about is very, very important to have the opening statements from the mediators about highlighting the ground rules, and also reminding about what mediation is. It's often at a community level. People come in and they just completely, they come into the session and think that you're going to make the decisions for them. So, so I think we would, at the beginning is really, really important. And then we go into information gathering stage, which we allow 5 to 10 minutes each
Mhm.
each to explore, for each party to talk about what happened, and then setting the agenda, so the points that each party would like to discuss during the session, and not to exclude anything, so to have everything on the board, and then exploring the options, and then fifth stage, an agreement writing sort of session.
Good. How long does a typical mediation session last for you?
2 hours.
2 hours per session.
And we also allow the opportunity to come back again for another session.
Excellent. Okay, good. For the entire mediation, 2 hours?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Whew, okay. I'm going to go to him the next time.
Long or short?
Short.
I think it's short. Yeah, so that's the way
I mean,
I
it's just from a neighbourhood perspective.
Okay.
So it's kind of, you know, we usually do have a second session.
Yeah.
But we try and, because it's very hard for people to be sat in a room for more than 2 hours. So it's
Yeah,
quite-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to give some contrast, in my workplace we have speediation, which sometimes is 45 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know judges that do also, they call a speed mediation before they go into the courtroom to see whether they can settle before.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah. My record is 20 minutes. I did all the steps honest.
Really? Oh, wow, amazing.
Only once.
Good morning, David. You're just coming in for the break, almost, yeah. Okay. Pascal, sorry.
Just on this, there was a study done in Switzerland with the Federation for Mediators. The average is 1.5 hours per session, and it's 4, 5, 6 sessions for these 5 steps.
Yeah.
A community mediation, neighborhood, social, family.
Or family, yeah. This group? This group, sorry.
We clarified 7 stages. The first is actually before you get the consent of the parties and signing mediation agreement, is that you make sure that all main stakeholders are involved, because otherwise you can't get to a conflict resolution. But the resolution won't work because you forgot a party.
Yeah.
So first you make sure as a mediator you do your homework and check what the main stakeholders in the country or the conflict are. Then you get the consent of the parties signing mediation agreements. Then you have the stage of defining the ground rules, what is discussed here, and clarifying the process, etc. Then we have the stage of framing the main issues. So you hear out about both stories, both sides. After hearing these, you analyze them as a mediator and repeat these to the others. Then you have the stage of exploring the possibilities and consequences for all parties together. And at the end you come to a resolution.
Okay. That's very complete, very structured. So you had 8, right?
7.
7. Okay.
You could make it
Yeah.
more or less.
Anybody wants to come in on here, or will I go on to the last group? 2 more. Yeah.
Oh.
I think he left himself out.
That's right.
Who have you mediated? Who's going to speak for your group? Yeah?
I'm not sure we came up well. And please to chime in. We agree there's more than 2. And we talked about a whole bunch of, I'll say, stages, I think, and defining those terms.
Right.
And we can probably put each of these bunches of words into steps. We talked about preparation and analysis and preliminary. I'm just going to quickly read my notes back in my mind. Preliminary investigation, then shuttle conversations with the parties so that we can build trust and confidence, confidential feelings, whatever. What, in some cases, we talked about possibly thinking about which mediators might work best in situations, combos of people, we agreed on what the issues might be among the mediator or mediators. Set the time up, the parties then are prepped. Oh, sorry, and they agree to a time. We talk about the boundaries, then you meet together and talk about the process, and then start talking about the review, I think the issues, right? And then also formal introductions. I think that's what
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about all the stuff you need to do before the two parties are together in the room.
Yeah.
Because that makes a big difference to how it kind of goes the other end.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did that, because I think that also an important point. I think either peace process or family or other mediation, preparation is really key.
50%.
Yeah, I think it's a large part of it. It requires very detailed preparation, and that's what I learned also from my big bosses, always who negotiated big agreements, is that preparation is almost everything, most of them, they negotiated in this, nice conference halls and things like this, but also, with the Syrian negotiations or others, they came in almost, as if it was a done deal. Unfortunately, in the end, it wasn't a done deal, because some of these issues weren't discussed maybe deeply enough and too fast, but preparation is key, absolutely. Okay.
So quickly, there's something about putting, their energy coming back and suddenly thinking about it. So you can gently channel their attention in the matter, so that they're actually quite focused by the time they're all getting there. Although sometimes they do that. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Roger. Really, it's a good point. Also, it's hugely important to make those assumptions as mediators. We've been working in that field, and sometimes we just rush in and get on with it. But you need to also really think about the parties, and know that most of the times they don't know anything about a mediation or a mediation process, and I think that I make that mistake very often. That I take the assumption that they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. Yeah. Okay, before the break, just quickly, these are the steps that I most commonly identify. The preparation, as you have said. You get the slides, as I said.
Yeah.
Preparation, the opening. I leave it on for the break if you want it. Digging deeper. Naming, framing issues. This is what we're going to get a little bit into. Problem solving stage. 4. Coming to a conclusion stage. And I think that's all. We talked about all of this. And then the implementation. And we discussed that after the break. The implementation of the agreement. I'd like to discuss just very briefly with you after the break. Is that where we should get involved as mediators in the implementation of the agreement? Such, before we end, can you give us one little exercise to invigorate ourselves? Standing.
No, you can simply sit on the chair, spread your legs very far. Just look a little bit for the
Okay, then just hold it for my camera, please.
You can catch the feet on the chair at the back.
We talked about the different ways of doing mediation, different styles. So we were talking about all of these wonderful stages in mediation. The importance of being aware of these stages, but also, that's the one part of it, how structured or non-structured you are is part of your style. Then another part of the style is whether you're facilitative, whether you're more of a powerful mediator, whether you're an accommodating type of mediator, somebody who's more of a problem solver. There's all different kinds of mediation. One of the things that I always come across is that diplomats often think that what the work that they do is also mediation. Is that mine? No, that's not. Did my child cry? No, no. Okay, the door is squeaking. Selective listening, we call that. Where was I? Okay, it's the different types of mediation, and I distinguish between 3 types. I'm going to put them up right here. There's the power-based deal brokering. That's the one that we discussed yesterday, who might come in at a later stage in the conflict spiral. Yeah, remember that when it's highly escalated, maybe you need the more sort of hands-on power mediator. They exert power, influence, and pressure. Often in the international world, they have sticks and carrots, as they're called. You know, they have incentives, sometimes to bring huge financial aid packages. You come to the table, we've got a nice package for you to implement the reforms that you say you're going to implement. Sometimes, and that's an issue, especially for the diplomats, you do use manipulative tactics to bring the parties to an agreement. Now, we've talked about ethical things. I mean, manipulation, obviously, is something that as a mediator, technically, you know, as per code of conduct, you don't, let's say, apply. What happens if a conflict is highly escalated? There's life at stake, you know. Actually, we start to become really concerned about wanting to end the hostilities. And then this is where the boundary between mediation and diplomacy and power tactics and manipulation becomes very thin. At the beginning we said, well, in the end, holistically, but you're trying to get towards to is that you are impartial, you want to come to an agreement, you want to be inclusive, all these principles we talked about yesterday. You know, but in the end, I mean, there are these sort of manipulative tactics, and you know, the question is whether you can call that mediation or not. I don't know whether you come across these kind of dilemmas yourself.
You know, when you say loss of life, I mean,
Yeah.
to me that's just mind-blowing to think. I've just never been in that case.
Yeah.
Children's mental health is one thing, but you know, people dying is hugely different. But like you say, I have a hard time thinking of the manipulations for this being mediation, because it's not in my frame of reference.
Yes.
I think very often we have a preferred style as mediator, and then we use our style for any type of conflict, and that's actually a mistake, because we should use the right tool for the conflict. The style should adapt to the conflict and not the other way around. So, as you're saying, if there are hostilities and people are killed, I would say it's good to do power-based debrokering. We should stop the hostilities, and we can still switch at the end. But we should see, that's why the analysis is important. What is the situation? And then we take the right tool for that situation, and we do not impose our preferred approach to the situation.
Okay. Good point. I mean, both, I was just thinking, family mediation or international conflict. All we were concerned about, for example, in Ukraine or in many other cases I can think of, but let me just think about Ukraine right now, is that to put an end to the hostilities, right? So, and in a family mediation, for example, if there was violence, we're trying to put an end to the violence, domestic violence, no? Now what happens, and this is really the tricky part of it, is that you get to a cessation of hostilities agreement, so-called COPA, and then it stays there. This is where it stays in the middle of the circle. It stays in the middle, you know? You're just maintaining, actually, the conflict. Because all you wanted is to end that hostility, and you think that you're going to negotiate after that, and oftentimes that doesn't work. So this is a real dilemma for a mediator. You know, how much or whether you can use manipulative tactics to go beyond that.
But has that to do with writing, which you talked about yesterday?
Yes.
Because I wonder.
Yeah. Yeah?
No, I'm just wondering, like, what are you going to do? How does it look like? Because sometimes if it's not ready yet, you have to deal with what is, I think.
And it's one of these, I got you, and one of these deep, almost philosophical issues is that how much conflict can we permit ourselves to be part of our life? Conflict is always an opportunity for change. It's part of our evolution. Yeah? How much, but it's good in brackets or bad, you know, how much can I allow to happen? You know, what in order for it to be resolved? Maybe the conflict in the end, even without our intervention, question mark, might resolve itself.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, because when you were mentioning, is there like, I'm always thinking about the option, because I'm always using case of my country, because unfortunately it's a good example of bad mediation. But what is when mediation is actually the source of conflict? Because in our case, after failed mediation, conflict started after mediation. In 1999, when there was no result, actually mediators used violence, because mediators were also the interveners afterwards. So this is actually contravening everything that you're saying, but you're mentioning here, which is probably power-based. But this is the other way around. They first tried with mediation, then when they failed, they used violence to solve the conflict. So is that a common thing, or is it just an exception in our case? I mean, do you have any experience with that?
I think it's not an exception.
Okay.
Especially from the international community.
International,
you know, and then there's 3 stages actually, but you got you. Do you want to come in on this point?
No.
Okay. So, and there's so many. Congo is another one, you know, for example. You come in, you know, you try to do power-based mediation, it fails, and then they said, okay, now we use power, and then they come back and mediate afterwards, huh? It's a classic.
Well, on that point,
sorry, I just wanted to add, in our case there was no mediation afterwards, it was just pure victory. So the whole concept of starting mediation was completely disappeared at some point.
Yeah, and then sometimes in your statistics, for example, this is interesting where you can dig deeper as well. It's called a mediation victory in a conflict that is resolved by victory, but only after military victory.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
interesting part.
Well, to me, that raises the question of whether the mediator initially was impartial, and whether it's appropriate for that party to mediate.
Very good. Yes, 2 points here.
Cessation without resolution or transformation is pacification. The conflict will come back, and that's a lesson of history. You put it down, put a lid, it will erupt. You borrow time. Sometimes, however, you need a certain level of cessation to be able to go to transformation. That's our experience.
Thank you.
I didn't realise looking at the spiral yesterday and the work that I've done. Whilst I've never been at the top end, 8 and 9, I'm always between 1 and 6. Never less than 1. And always, I mean, forever. It never gets to 8 or 9, which is good, or 7 or 8 or 9, which is good. But there's always this background level of conflict. There are always the possibilities of threats, and accusations and underminings. I thought, wow.
Good, you had a light bulb moment.
But that it was actually, and that but it had become normalised. People would say, no, that's how it always is. It's always been like that, and it has, certainly for Indigenous people in Australia for 200 years.
Okay, so there's an anatomy of the conflict almost. Okay. You have a point?
Go ahead, my mom.
Yeah? I think then for the international community you have something, I don't know whether you heard about the principle of responsibility to protect. Yeah? So, there is also a balance to strike between, on the one hand, the responsibility to protect the life of civilians and having a mediation, enacting an impartial mediation, and this is where these normative frameworks come in again, right? And that's where that it all becomes a little bit more blurry, whether you can do a mediation, as I say in French, pure et dur. Huh? Yeah, so that's it's really challenging. It's really one of these dilemmas that you face as a mediator. Then the interest-based problem solving is sort of also an ideal, way of also, especially in business mediations or with economic actors. I think it's maybe the type of mediation that you do, David, as well. Facilitated style, but you also you discussed about it. You throw in a solution maybe once in a while. You help them to open their sort of ideas about solutions. And then there's the transformative part of mediation, and that's also interesting to look about, the transformative long-term mediation, which also, the difference between what mediation is and what dialogue is. A lot of people make a distinguish between mediation and dialogue practice. Would you like to?
What is the difference? What is the difference?
Well, so I think that people would see mediation as a process that has a beginning as an end, yeah, and it's more conscious as a practice. Whereas dialogue is an ongoing process that might not be measured, in time. It might change the stakeholders, but in the end, the goal is, the goals are often very similar. Yeah, a lot of practitioners would say that even if there's a mediation, dialogue must continue. And that adds on to the point that I mentioned before, is the implementation. It's like, okay, you negotiate an agreement and then, you walk off as the mediator and say, okay, bye, see you later. What is your responsibility here, Now, when you do a neighborhood conflict mediation, you're done with, you go home, you have your dinner, and that's it, and tomorrow's the next neighborhood mediation. But what happens if they still sort of tear each other's fences down or something like that? That's maybe, it's none of your business actually, isn't it?
Well, personally it would be.
Personally it's not.
Professionally maybe it's not, but personally or ethically you want to know.
Yeah, again, small issue here.
First of all, to say that I like the way you explained differences between mediation and dialogue, because people understand it in different ways, and we as practitioners have troubles explaining that to people. Because as we all know, I think, but just to trying to clarify to myself also, dialogue and mediation are intertwined, and we can go into the phase of mediation and then go back to dialogue and then to mediation and then back and forth. So sometimes we need to say clearly what is the process of mediation in order to get to some conclusion and to some to solve some problem in community. Still, if you work in a certain community, as we do, Nansen tends to be present in certain community, multi-ethnic community, and to work for several years with people, with local authorities, representatives, and with schools mostly. Then I catch myself that we are mediating actually between the sides, unofficially, without them knowing that it is mediation and so on. So it's a very thin line between these two processes, that's what I'm trying to say. It's useful sometimes to clearly say, now let's have the clear process of mediation if we want us to get to some conclusions.
Thanks.
You raised something.
Do you want to come in?
In a second, I also with the coughing and everything, I'll sit back here for I always find it very difficult, maybe you should point is that the definition of mediation has an end, but then if you solve the problem at the moment and then you leave and then you find out they are still tearing the fences down, I find that I didn't do my job. So how do you, and then that lingers perhaps into almost a sense of confidence building for yourself of the next mediation. It may be an entirely different project, but
I think you pointed out, this is not part of the program, but maybe 2 points on that, is that both, I think there is a trend in the mediation field to recognize that there is something here that we need to work on. In the international community, the fact that, as I said, the statistic that 70% of most peace agreements fail within 5 years has given a lot of rise for, internationals to think about it. Most peace agreements now today have a clause in them that that looks, that has a monitoring phase to it. There's a 1-year monitoring, that there's actually a group of people who follow the monitoring of the peace agreement. And then they have a matrix basically, and whether that works or not is another question. Yeah, I've done it in the case of the Aceh peace agreement, and the monitoring worked, but only to show actually how few items of the agreement were actually implemented, which was kind of embarrassing in the end. But then that meant, so that we were faced with another dilemma, because then what do? Do you reopen everything? Do you have to renegotiate everything? Question mark. Then
is it also possible that it's part of the deal? Like, how are you going to implement it together, and what are you going to do if you don't do it?
Yes.
Sort of like that.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Still they break it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then last year in New York, I asked these people who negotiated amazing agreements, from Sudan to Guatemala to whatever, and I said, so none of your peace agreements have actually been implemented fully. Got you. And they said, well, that's the way it is. Maybe it's sometimes just important to have it on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Is it never in international mediation? Is it never included like a post meeting with a mediator, like a year later or something like that?
No, they most of the times not, but more increasingly so. Yeah. You had something important to say.
It was unique in the Philippine government and the more Islamic Liberation Front. There is an international contact group that are not party to the conflict, but being recognized by both parties, and they provide this mechanism of monitoring, talking to the parties when they are stuck, and so on. So it helps.
Okay. Last comment, and then I go on. Yeah.
I guess this is, okay. So something that I found kind of interesting hearing this conversation and just some of the work that I've started getting involved in is just a sustained dialogue on a particular topic, like, for instance, abortion or homosexuality. There's extreme, this is all I can relate to, there's extreme, feelings on either side. But this organization that I've just recently become involved in set up a sustained dialogue among abortion believers and anti-abortion believers. And basically, they just started the conversations, and it went on for years and still continues. And what has happened is they've become friends. They've agreed that they are never going to agree, but they work together, and the violence has ceased. And that they continue to meet to this day. And I'm wondering if that's could be like a pre-mediation thing, and if there's something that could be agreed on, and then something written into the mediation agreement where there's sustained dialogue among the parties.
Absolutely.
And the other thought that I have is, and maybe this is really big idealistic, but I think about peace education and how do you implement that into our countries, our nations, and our children, so that they don't think conflict. You talked about the evolution of conflict, I think. I mean, if we change that whole view, I know that takes generations, but it seems like that's something.
Now you mentioned a lot of important points. I'd love to get into them. I also would like to get into the communication skills now. Just as a footnote, maybe to say that dialogue is used as a tool for conflict mitigation as well, that there are issues where there are attitudes, there are norms, there's issues maybe that are not divisible, and dialogue is a good tool to continue at least to not to fight about it, right? But to find another constructive way of dealing with it. Okay, let's see. Who's familiar with the interest-based model of mediation? Okay. So who would like to explain it? Okay, I give you the cues and you say something about it, each one of you. Okay? So, what is it? Where does it come from? Who invented it?
It was the Harvard negotiation project and Fisher, Uri.
Yeah, Roger Fisher?
And Fisher and Uri, I don't remember. William Uri.
Yeah.
William Uri.
Yeah.
And their focus is about the interest or needs, but mainly interest. How can they define the problem? And as far as they are compatible, then they solve the problem, because as far as you satisfy the interest, then you solve the problem.
Right. Okay.
Could you write the name of the...
Get into yes. It's enough to put in the Google get into yes.
Get into yes.
Get into yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Getting to, can you separate the people from the problem? Who would like to come in on this? Yeah?
Maybe.
Yeah?
Yeah, but very often we are caught up in the conflict and start accusing people, and each time someone else is to be blamed and so on. So to separate individuality from what happened or from what someone did at that particular time. If I did something wrong to you, that does not mean that I'm a bad person, for example. Something. And insist on that, because people go back into it.
They come back into
Yeah.
it, right? So you every single time you're trying to do that at all stages in the mediation, right? Think in terms of interest, not positions. We're gonna get into that in a second. Practically, that's almost straightforward. That's all we discussed here. Consider both sides' options at the table and alternatives away from the table. What does that mean?
Well, they introduce these terms called BATNA and WATNA, which means the best alternative to a negotiated agreement and the worst. And it's something that you can use to remind the parties, if they don't come to a resolution, what their options are, so as a sort of reality check.
BATNA and WATNA. Who's familiar with this? Okay. This is, we can also discuss it a little bit later in more detail again. You explained it very nicely. It's explained in a very complex way in the books. But it's true, it's the best alternative and the worst alternative. It's really set very simple. For example, if you get into, what do you ask your client?
A lot of times it's economic based.
Yeah.
So we look at, if I have a client, and when the advocate, as a lawyer, it's a lot easier to talk about that and whatnot, because it's sort of saying to them, this is the worst case scenario of your monetary exposure, and this is the best alternative that we can potentially come up with. So we in there, keep that in mind. And if it's not, if I'm a mediator, it's a little harder as a mediator to do that, because you have to stay neutral.
Yes.
So you really shouldn't be necessarily having those conversations. I mean, in the caucus you can. At least I have in the caucus sort of given some sort of opinions on where things could go.
Right.
Arbitrary, like for example, like the easier one would be like the client says, well, what happens if we don't solve things in mediation? I'll be like, well, you're going to arbitration if you have an agreement.
Exactly.
If you don't, you're going to submit to litigation, which could be a 3-year process with appeals.
Is that what you want?
Exactly.
Yeah, and in the international case, is that you say, so what are your alternatives? This is especially when you try to get them to come to the table for a mediation process. It's a good way of maybe convincing them and making sure whether that they're truly committed. But what is your best alternative here? Yeah, do you want the situation to continue as it is? So as a mediator, it's not only important what my BATNA and WATNA is, but also what the parties' BATNAs and WATNAs are, and what their positions and interests is. So, what I often do is that when I look at, my actor mapping, or, I look at the actors that are in there, we consider, okay, not only what their needs, interests, and positions are, but also, and you nicely pointed out to that yesterday, what their butners and whatners are. Because, you know, let's face it, in the international, but also maybe in the national sense, they might do something that's called forum shopping. Yeah? They say, okay, let's see what mediator am I going to choose, what carrots and stick do they have. So you make sure that they're, you know, really convinced to come to the table with you, rather than shopping around for others. As Lakta Brahimi says, make sure that it's your process and there's only one process. Okay.
And there's also another dimension to this Patna, that people actually they do things, they create facts before they come to the table, because they are afraid maybe the negotiation, mediation will not be successful. So let's try to improve our situation, so that in case it fails, we have alternative options. That's something that also we have to be aware of. We had once a Britannia case about a project, or a travel project in Europe, that failed, and there was huge disaster. And we went to that mediation. When we arrived the first day during the process, the two main actors, they revealed that actually they have already launched legal claims against each other. Because they were afraid, or maybe they were not really believing in the mediation, I'm not sure, but they did this just before the mediation. And of course it was just destroyed the whole process. If then during the process you find out, okay, I made a legal claim against you, the other one, yeah, actually me too against you. Okay guys, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
They try to have the best alternative in case. And because of this, they try to create an alternative, and it's actually the alternative who destroys the mediation.
So what did you do?
Well, that one failed actually.
Okay, that happens. Did you want to? No? One last point? Yeah?
Just to follow up, is that therefore the difficulty in interest-based mediation when people go to their bottom lines, alternatives?
Can I respond to that? Just to help. One of the techniques that we were taught is you anchor. So if you are...
You're showing, you anchor, which is a, yeah?
Right.
What does that mean?
And you're putting out, if it's a number negotiation in mediation, you're putting out a number right up front rather than holding back, and therefore psychologically it puts everybody, even the opposition on the other side of the table, in a psychological behavior position to actually have to focus on that number. And there's been a lot of, I've actually tried it, it actually works.
It's a classic carpet selling technique.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, who has bought a carpet in your, in a Middle Eastern country? Carpet. Yeah. What happens? A carpet. Like the carpet. Yeah. Just like I wanted to explain anchoring. Yeah? Yeah, you have.
They mention the price first, and then you...
Yeah. And funnily enough, also interesting, I know I don't want to go too off much, is that when you get to mention the price, very often you mention a higher price.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? So, and this is kind of anchorage, and around that price you negotiate. And often they throw in. So this is the anchoring effect. But I'm not sure whether that explains, that gives you an answer to the question, the bottom line, and I would like you to just illustrate your question a little bit further, so we understand why, what's behind that question. Can you?
Yeah, it's just juxtaposing that to the best alternative to negotiating agreement. Because oftentimes negotiators, parties to the conflict, have their own bottom line.
Yes, they know their bottom line.
They know their bottom lines. How do you surface that? How do you deal with that?
You mean how the mediator will find out about their bottom line? Through questioning, I would say. Caucus meetings and questioning, you try to tease that out. You need to be aware of it as well. And sometimes it's interesting, the parties have the bottom line, right? But sometimes you can crack that as well. You can maybe increase some of the options that are on the table so that bottom line will maybe shift a little bit. Yeah, we get into that questioning as well. Okay, who has done that orange game already? Okay, all of you? Do you know the orange game? Let's do it quickly. Because, Pascal, where are the oranges?
Tree.
Yeah. There we go. We could have a little mediation about that. Now we traveled to the other village yesterday and asked in all restaurants whether they had oranges. And one of them had this one orange. So I wanted all of you to play that game, but also since you already have done it, we played only once, and there is one brother and one sister here. Please come here. And I would like to the ones who know the game please not solve it. Yeah? Okay, so here's the orange. I'm gonna put it here. Okay. So we need a mediator.
Always get everything what you want. How is that possible? Last week you get the apple.
You got it.
No.
You got today, this morning, you got the apple.
No.
Give it back.
No. Mom. No. She always gets what she
You
wants.
always leave for him to get everything what he wants. Oh, it's not fair. You see, you do nothing.
She was raised like a spoiled brat, you know? Everything what she wants.
You see, he's bigger than me.
Yeah.
That's too much close to reality. So could I have a mediator now who doesn't know the game? Anybody who knows not the game yet?
No, sort of not. Doesn't know.
You know? Somebody come up?
Who doesn't know the game?
Yeah, you will come up?
Yes.
So, okay, so now you will negotiate between these.
Good luck.
Come here. Okay.
Alright, where do we start from here?
I want the orange. That's very good because I didn't have an orange for 2 weeks.
She got the apple last week, you know, and she always gets what she wants.
But that's an
I
apple.
want the orange. So I think it would be fair if I get the orange because she got my apple last week.
He always gets everything. It's my turn now.
But you got the apple last week, I didn't.
You don't care about apples. This is an orange.
You got everything last week, so I got everything this week.
Yeah, but I don't want apples. I want this orange.
Then I need to. I wanted the
Also
apple.
what?
I love that apple last week.
Okay.
Let me suggest something. Can we have this orange?
No, I want apple. I want the
I want I mean, you know, it's not fair. She got the whole apple, I want the whole orange.
Okay. Maybe I'll give you the orange and then you half it with your brother.
Give me the orange.
That's a solution, isn't it? You give her the orange,
Yes.
and what does he get?
Half of the orange.
Okay, so you
She
half
shares.
the orange. Okay. Very good. He cuts it in half.
No.
Okay.
No. He
No,
suggests
I think it's her the orange. It's like
and then she shares it with her brother.
Okay, and you share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but she didn't agree on that.
Who's the older? Is she
Okay.
the older?
I'm older.
Oh, you're the older.
Yeah.
With your sister.
Yes.
Okay, that's one. Thank you. Wait, stay here. Take it back and find another mediator. Okay, there's one.
One.
Okay.
Now it's your turn.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to know why would you like to get this orange?
I'm gonna make a cake and I need the peel for making the cake, so I need the orange.
Yeah, I just want the flesh
And you,
because I want the juice.
please, you don't define the rules, I define the rules. Please tell me, why would you like this orange?
I just want to make some juice. Some juice.
And your cake.
Yeah, I'm gonna make the cake, so I need to peel it and not the skin,
Okay,
skin
please, sit down. Listen now. Are you agree to share? Did you agree? Do you agree to share this orange? Half and half.
What do you mean, half?
To cut in the middle. One piece for you, one piece for you. Do you agree?
I don't think that makes sense.
Okay, I would like to tell you a story. There is only one orange. I would like also this orange for me because I have 2 children at home and they like orange and they would like to share, but sometimes I give up an advice. You have to share, and good education is to listen. So if you don't agree to share this orange, I will take it at home and I will come back tomorrow and you discuss again. So what would you like to know? You decide now, I go back home and you decide tomorrow. So tell me, what would you like to do?
I want to make a cake with orange.
No? Just listen to my question. Would you like to decide now to share? Or would you come back home tomorrow?
I can't wait.
Okay, okay, I'm sitting down. I practice Zen meditation. When we don't find a solution, you are the solution. I am the solution.
Okay, have you solved
No, it's not finished. Duality is not a good process because duality means conflict. So you are 1, 2, 3.
But she only wanted the peel.
Yes.
He only wanted the flesh.
For you. You have enough to make a cake.
No, she only wants to be
You are sure.
the
The other 1 and 2. So you can see we share exactly in equality. So if you want more, you have to take me an advice for my children. Please tell me an advice for my children to teach how to share.
I think your children will very much like this if
Oh.
you give me this one.
Thank you very much. And you?
I just need this to make juice.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well done, good actors, huh? I'm actually quite glad we didn't do it with Aguilera because I think it would have involved in Okay. Now, for those of you who know the game, could you explain what you expected?
Well, I expected when they both said what they wanted, that the mediator would go, okay, well, if you need to peel, you take it first, take off the peel, and then give it to your brother who can use it to make juice.
That was the interest, right? Yeah. What was their need?
Well, my expectation is that initially people jump to conclusions that the fairest outcome is to halve it.
Yes.
And they think that's the best outcome.
Yeah.
But if you don't explore people's why, I think the important question you asked was why do you need it?
Yes.
If you don't ask that, you don't explore their position.
That was the cue, yeah. And when they said, just to you did that, you were a very directive mediator, so to say. You knew what you wanted. You wanted to have an outcome, and that's also a key for the mediator. Sometimes we really, really want to have an outcome. We know there is an outcome. There must be an outcome. There must be a solution. So they said to you, one of them said, look, I want the peel and I want the juice. Did you hear that?
Yes.
You did hear it. Okay. And when you heard that, yeah?
Well, I would suggest, okay, do you want to make a cake and do you want to drink the juice? So maybe which part of the orange do you need for
Yeah,
me?
but you know the game, right?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, you didn't know? Okay, so you would have asked that question.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So what did you, I wondered what you were thinking, you know, but at that moment when they told you what they wanted, what did you want?
I think the key problem is not the orange, it's education and how to listen the need of others, you know. They didn't want to listen to each other, you know. When people don't want to communicate, there is no communication at all, you know. So
you thought
there is no end.
You thought the problem was actually something else.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, in a way I thought the same, but I think I would have asked. So it seems there's an easy solution. Why is it you fight so much, right? To try and get them to go deeper to that.
Right, that's the psychologist approach. Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask if something like this happens in real mediation, that mediator gets something for himself.
Very deep question. What's in it for the mediator? Does it happen in real life? You know, that the mediator has actually something that he or she wants to achieve? You know, are you an unwritten piece of paper, or is there something that, you know, you come with your norms and your, you know, whatever ideas as well as what you want to? Do you want to come in on this? Yeah?
Yeah, just a short comment. In the real mediators, no, but since Nemanja already mentioned those guys that were coming in the Balkans, they were arbiters or envoys, or they were not mediators from my point of view at all. So they were getting something from it, obviously, or they were representing interests of one side, powerful side actually, in international community representing whoever it was at the moment. So they were getting something, not obviously, even through these official and unofficial talks, but they were fulfilling interests of someone else who were not these two sides.
Exactly.
And that is simply not allowed in mediation.
Yeah, that is the thing that where you see the mediation arena that we pointed out with all these figures and all these background drops. Yeah, Cesar, and then Hilde.
Yeah, if I'm one of the disputants in that case, I would have walked out. Because I don't want the mediator to moralize, to be a teacher or to be a priest. That's
yeah, but she was very strong, huh? So maybe that's how she kept them there. She was there is also sometimes the question, people who do that, they have sometimes a moral authority to do it. Yeah, but thanks for saying that.
Well, it's more, it's pretty much about the last slide, but it also applies now. When you say you have to tease people and like look for what they want, or you also come, I think, in international conflict in the arena of intercultural communication, where you have no idea what's really the way to get information. I've had it in Mexico where you go like, I feel there is something, but I have no way of knowing, or I don't know how to ask for it. And there's sort of this limbo where you go like, there must be something, but I have no access to it.
And worse is that if you get it through translation as
yeah.
well.
So is there anybody who actually has done intercultural mediation that has like some experience or like a solution or a way of dealing with it?
I think, you know, there is no way of really dealing with it in a way. Is that there is these things that, for example, when we negotiated with the Indonesians, you know, or the Achenese, or in Georgia also, you know, even though you speak Russian, you know, there's still some finesse in this. You know, at one stage you get, it's like a feel that you get that, as you said, there's something is not right here. Yeah. Yeah, they non di, you know, they're not things that are not said, the iceberg issues, I'm going to get to that. And the best thing is that once we worked through with translators we know, and we made them actually almost part of the process because they were, you know, part of the mediation team. But then the problem was that they were part of the mediation team. They almost became the spokespeople of the mediation team, of the parties, you know. And that became a problem in itself, because then they started to say, no, we shouldn't agree to this or we should agree to that. Yeah? Big dilemma that teaches us also, you know, about the limited role a third international party can actually play. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I can respond. I had an experience in Sri Lanka, bringing Tamils and Sinhalese together. First day, nothing happens. It was not a mediation process. It was just a coming together for a dialogue. Second day, nothing happened. On the third day, there was a breakthrough. When I began to ask, what kind of a Sri Lanka are you willing to live with? Then they began to think.
So you ask a larger question then.
You bring them out to a future space where it's safe and they can confront some of the issues.
I'm glad you say that as well, because it's, this was the balloon. Who had the balloon picture? Yeah, you had the balloon picture. The mediator also tries to, and I don't know what American mediator said, if you step out on the balcony, you may not only you as the mediator step out on the balcony to look down and see what's happening, that you also sometimes try to bring up the parties to step out on that balcony or to come into the balloon with you, to see actually their situation a little bit from the top and say, it's actually not all that difficult, right? Yeah, so well done. Yeah?
Sorry, just a little one. Just in a smaller answer to that, I guess, is you can do a lot of reality testing. You can say things like, when I hear you say that, what I'm hearing is this. Is that what you're saying? I mean, you're still working with translators, but you're forcing attention onto the actual communication that's going on, and you're even actually having a communication about the communication, which at least puts the attention there for a little time, just to check and make sure that and it sends a message also that that's an issue for everyone, and so everyone needs to treat it not carefully, but be aware of it as a reminder to not only yourself, but other people too.
Very good. Okay.
On the intercultural question, I think it depends. It would be unique for each culture, so I don't think there's a way to prepare generally. But if beforehand you have an opportunity to learn from an expert about nuances, about the culture, about communication, I think that's the best way to prepare. And then you know how to design the process, maybe change it a bit differently. Or be aware of things like saving face for some cultures, or communication. Like in Australia, Aboriginal people, to look directly in the eyes at someone is rude.
Yeah, that's not universal. And the way I deal with that when I work with people is ask, and people will tell me. So look, I don't know, and just say, if there's something I do, let me know. And if there's things I really should know, and there's always some lovely little old bloke or little old lady who will tell me. And they just do it. Yeah, just ask.
Yeah, and it's good to be, it's good that you bring it up, because the more aware you are of it, the more you can feel it, and the more you can place attention on these kind of things, little details. They do count. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, this is
just a question about the exercise.
Yeah.
I wondered why you made us sit down. Was it because we were children? Or would you have done the same thing with adults? Or I just wondered.
Yes, because I thought when you are sitting, you are focused on the situation, and then after I sit it with you, is to replace the subject on the focus on the situation. We were children, and I was mandated to make mediation, and this is also a kind of respect between us, you see, and then I sit it with you to respect people.
Okay.
For me, here asking them to sit down, I took it as a metaphoric act because they were role playing. But for me, it was like seeking for an agreement to be on the table and lay ground rules for negotiation.
Nice.
So it was just sit down because this is a role play, but it's a stage that she took.
Good.
Well, I thought it was a good way to ground them, like that's an expression.
Very good, yeah.
But at the same time, I noticed that she then had immediately a much bigger power over them because of her standing position.
Nice observation, nice observation. Also then you get on the same level almost, huh? The same side, because he is like that, and last input? No? Okay.
I would say, what is the place for intuition in mediation? Do we use sometimes intuition? If sometimes we see that nothing is working, all knowledge that I have gathered with mediation, it is not working. Doesn't need sometimes intuition?
Sure.
Just
yeah, on this point, it's sort of a really interesting topic for me that I've thought about a lot. There is this concept of the 4 stages of development from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And when you have this unconscious competence, it's the sort of the final stage, is when you start to intuitively read situations and act and react without it being conscious.
And that's why, no, it's very good, because that's why we use that in all levels of professional development. It's also something that's very important for coaching, for example. You have so much ingrained also some of the attitudes and practices, and that, then you open up your intuition. You need to open it up. I think this is where you find some beautiful solutions. You actually start to see things at the table that you weren't able to see before because you were thinking in this compartmentalized way sometimes. Yeah.
I wrote an essay on it, I think it's...
Okay, great. Yeah, share it with all of us, please. Yeah. Okay?
Yes, it was also a joke and a kind of provocation to you, addressed to you, because in order to react, exactly, intuition, because we start with a framework that the solution is always unexpected. So an expectation is the unknown. And when I'm the third party, we get of the binary confrontation, we have to jump into the unknown sometimes, with safety of course, but intuition is a great part of perception.
Yeah, right? And even as the mediator, we make an assumption. It's interesting, sometimes you get, I mentioned the door thing yesterday, right? That you think like, gosh, the solution is so easy. I don't know what their problem is really, but okay, I'm going to work through the motions and make them come to that conclusion. And I made that assumption that that was the conclusion, but the conclusion was something different. Yeah. So if you were teasing that out, yeah. Right. Just as a solving sort of that's a very basic way of looking at the position, interest, and needs. I think you're all familiar with this. I just wanted to put it on the overhead just so it's there. We have it. Yeah? You want me to explain it? Somebody wants to come into it? I have one point on it. That's it. Yeah? When you think about needs, this is really sort of the school book version. You have the positions, what they say, they want, the interest, what they kind of really want, and then the needs, why they want it, right? Very basic, if I explain it like that. And then you teach mediation, and then they say, okay, so what are the needs? What are the needs? And then you start, okay, you have the Maslow basic needs, your food, shelter, security, love. And then I find out that there are actually a lot of fundamental needs and issues that are totally undivisible. Yeah, and where I say, maybe we need to cut the orange in half. Maybe there is not always a peel and flesh solution as we have here. And there is that solution that you're talking about. Maybe sometimes you need to halve the orange, and that answers also some of the questions with us yesterday. Maybe there is not always a win-win solution. What would be these needs? Like, for example, I have worked a lot with unrecognized territories that claim independence. Yeah? What is their basic need? I always thought, this is also an assumption, their basic need is to have their identity recognized. Yeah? They have a distinct culture, a distinct language, a distinct history. And I said, okay, can we not make I'm simplifying things now, huh? Can we not make an arrangement that all of these issues become recognized because this is really important to you? But for example, in the case of Georgia, Abkhazia, or No, we want, but we, you know, our history tells us we want our independent state. So is that a basic need?
It's what in business communication is called escalation of commitment, where you have invested so much time and money and effort in something that you really letting go is not an option anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
if you reach that point, it's horrible because really, for those people, there is no other option.
So it becomes frozen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So so-called frozen conflicts, which are not really frozen, but yeah, very good. Entrapment in sunk cost, yeah.
A very often population is so tired about the situation and they don't care anymore if they're independent or not. They just want peace. But
So
what
did you say? Armenian?
Armenia, yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about Nagorno-Karabakh now?
I wouldn't talk on behalf of Nagorno.
No, but you talking, that's what you talk about? No.
I just say in general.
Okay.
If you ask people in the country,
Yeah.
they don't care anymore. They want peace. But then it becomes the aim of the leaders in the top level to have independence.
Exactly.
So it's not only about the population having their identity.
Yeah.
I very nicely explained, because I would agree that freedom and peace are basic needs, but not that the territory is the basic need. Because exactly as you explained, politicians convince people that that is the basic need. And how about the others? You need to share the territory with someone at any point in time. I mean, you cannot just simply take it away, and because you know that's clear win-lose solution in any case. Even if you divide it and if parties agree and they consent to that, I mean that is some kind of bad compromise, if you ask me. If we can find solutions where people are satisfied, recognized, and they have cultural autonomy and so on, that is much better for me, and I don't know, more realistic simply. Territories are being fought for the sake of leaders' positions or for the sake of becoming part of the history or whatever, I don't know. But that is not the need, if you ask me from experience from the Balkans.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion that we can have. There is the situation we have at hand today in this world with more and more separatist conflicts going on internationally. And you do wonder, you know, why this importance of territories and state boundaries is being sort of revived. Maybe, you know, we will find an answer to that, but maybe also the question is how we frame the situation at hand. And you know, there the international politics is very good at framing in such a way that it serves maybe its own interests and frame it in a territorial context. Huh? And we talk about the framing before the break, and we have about half an hour left. Okay, this one I think that we can. I want to go through fairly quickly because I want to go into the framing issue as well. We have competing interest. That's just what we said. I want X to happen, and you don't. We have complementary interest. This is what happened here in the orange game, ideally. You know, I want X a lot, but I don't care much about Y. And you want Y a lot and don't care much about X. Is sort of the mediator's ideal case. And then you have share interest. It's even, you know, so I want X to happen, so do you. That's what people realize during a mediation process. Often it happens that they want the same thing, but for some reason, because of a communication issue or a peel in the onion that you had to take off, that onion we're going to have for lunch, you know, we don't see it, or the parties don't see it. And then what happens, then you get, you know, we talked about the best alternative to negotiated solution and the worst alternative. I always think about the zone of possible agreement. Are you familiar with that? So you have the positions. You see that the positions are not really aligned. Then you have the competing interests that you have identified in a negotiation. You kind of see the compatible agreement. And then you see the common interest, and obviously when, you know, we're working on the common ground, yeah, that is a nice way in a mediation process to start to identify those common interests as a trust building in order to create something that's called, oh no, I thought that was, okay, this is the zone of possible agreement. And this is what you as the mediator work with. This is just visually depicted what we've just discussed now. And you get these slides, don't worry. Yeah.
But sometimes there are no compatible interests, right?
Yeah.
It's always the case.
There's no compatible interest, there's no common interest?
Sometimes. There might be common needs. And
common needs?
Yeah. But with the interests, it's not always the case. Not sure.
Yeah, I've been in cases like that. Then you, there's like sort of these desperate moments as a mediator, said, where is that zone? How can I find it? and interestingly enough, and I would like to hear from the practitioners as well, it has come to me. I've encountered situations where I've said, you know what? I don't think this is going anywhere. I don't think there's anything you can agree, and we don't have, this is something that we can solve in this mediation. It happened to me. Whereas afterwards I would thought, oh, would I have talked with the individual parties a little bit more? Would I have explored a little bit more? These beginners' mistakes that you do, you could have, So I think maybe you want to come in on any of these points, yeah?
Or can he give an example? Be clear.
Yeah.
No, I guess it's like with the orange, for instance. The interest might be totally competing. Like I want to eat this orange, and the other one wants to eat the whole orange. And it's only about when we dig deep, maybe, and we get to the needs and add also other dimensions and be as creative as possible. Then we can. But when it comes to the interest, sometimes it's not always the case.
Right. Patience is needed as well. Really to really try to flesh it out. Yeah. Sometimes we give up too early. Yeah.
But I think the limits of that is the limit of our imagination. Because, like, if both people want to eat the orange, you can ask why again.
Yes.
And you might discover something more.
Yeah, that's why I was saying it's about the needs. It's about how do I want to eat the orange because I'm hungry, and the other one might be willing to want to eat the orange because the need was just to be recognized. I'm the older brother. It's not like every time, and then we can negotiate something.
Absolutely. Two more quick inputs, please, so we can get on.
Just a response to the question. Then you have established the interest of the orange. Why don't you bring another orange?
Exactly.
I've had that one as well.
That's what I meant by adding new dimensions.
Because you have come to a common interest.
Yeah.
So you provide a solution by addressing the interest. There's common interest.
If there are resources.
That's not
if there are more oranges.
Anyway, the other point, sorry, is common interest and needs equal to goals?
Of whom?
Goals of the parties. Are they the same?
Yeah, good question. Let's hold it and have the last comment, and then maybe answer that question.
I just thought in terms of common interest, I might find in the end that even if they both want all the orange, that it might be better for both of them in the end to eat half of the orange in peace rather than maybe have all the orange, but maybe lose it all and suffer from violence.
Okay, so you use it as a trust-building exercise. In terms of the goal, I think that sometimes it's interesting to note that sometimes the people, okay, there's two things. One case is that maybe there is no goal of the parties, they don't have a goal, yeah? And sometimes they have a goal that's actually formulated or in a different way, maybe different than the actual one. Yeah, it becomes quite complex then, and then there's the hidden goals, and that's something that we hopefully that slide that I've been looking at, and I'm running out of time. I want to do two more things with you that are really important.
When you say hidden goals, sorry.
Yeah, this is really enough now on the hidden goals.
Yes. For example, with the orange game,
Yes.
they both said you always get what you want. So there were actually other interests as well. So the actual conflict at that time was solved, but they will always, when there happens something and there's something to share, or
Yes.
there's only one thing, they will always, like, that's why probably peace agreements, most of them, aren't resolved, because you focus on the conflict at that time,
Right.
not on the hidden motives.
Excellent. So what could she have asked?
She could have asked, why do you experience that she always gets what she wants?
Why is that so? Yeah.
And the ongoing relationship, we've never ever talked about sharing the cake that she's going to make. And some of the oranges, in the context of an ongoing relationship and there's a future of their relationship.
Okay, that's a recapture about the famous iceberg picture that you probably know about. There's 20% of behavior and facts and figures, what you see at the table is the visible part of it. And this is where also your intuition, your psychological skills, your communication skills come in. 80% is the invisible. Sash, do you want to say something about this? Yeah?
Actually, it shows very, Jesus there telling that forgive them because they don't know what they are doing. Actually, this is what is happening with whole humanity. Mainly we are unconscious. This is showing that our behavior, the way even we are awakened here, we are talking, we are trying to discuss, to understand, but our understanding also has its own limits. So we remain mainly unconscious. So it is very important to sometimes seek the state of being rather than doing. When we are all the time doing, we are on the little bit of mainly in the hidden part. In order to find that clarity, we have to simply come down and understand what is. There is a beautiful story with Buddha who was traveling in India, and he was with his own disciples. He crossed a river, and then he said, I am very thirsty. He asked to Ananda, he was his cousin, very disciple, he said, can you go and get some water from the river we crossed? I said, then Ananda said, a few kilometers away there is another one. No, he said, I would like water from that. And then he said, okay, I will go. He went, and when he arrived to the river, he saw that already a few chariots has crossed already, and water is muddy, impossible to take water and bring it. He came, he said, no, the water is too muddy, I cannot take water for you, let's go to another one. He said, no, I want from that river, go. He went, he saw that water is troubled, it is muddy still. How I can collect this water? He simply sat until all those dirt went down and brought clean water. And he understood at that moment, enlightened, that sometimes I have simply to give up fighting, and things simply find its own peacefulness. And water was clear and brought that water. He said, you got it now. You see?
Right. So it's meaning to be also self-aware and to let settle things inside of you, being aware in every moment where you are. Really challenging. Thank you, Sash. I'm looking at the time, we're going until 12:15. So, and I'm trying to manage the time now a little bit. Let's see where we can go. Yeah. Here in Switzerland. I tried to find that yesterday on the internet. There's a nice Swiss Army knife, huh? Communications tool. I don't know whether there's so many, probably there are as many communications tools as there are knives here. Tell me a little bit, communication is not only what we say, huh? It's not only what, the English language that we speak now. It's also maybe the accent that I have. This is also a communication tool. Also, what are the communications tools that we have?
Our body.
Our body, the body language. Different ways of expressing ourselves. I can see sometimes energy is pretty good, but it's probably because you're thinking about lunch. Yeah. Eyes, eye contact. And then interestingly, we just said that in some countries, eye contact is not maybe desired or the norm.
Facial expressions.
Facial expressions, yeah. There's books written about facial expression, yeah.
Active listening.
Active listening, very good. We come to that. Thank you.
I would group all of this in non-verbal communication.
Non-verbal, okay, that's the non-verbal part of it.
And colors, the colors we choose to wear, it gives also information.
Okay, the way of how you dress.
The way how we dress.
Yeah.
Which perfume we use.
Ah, okay. Then we got to learn a lot from you.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
All this information about us, and even during the mediation and negotiations, if the table is round or if it's square.
The setting, yeah.
Setting the light.
Yeah.
When you are counting, when you are, for example, like this.
The way of how you're seated.
And then you are looking at only one side, or if you are looking just
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the whole room.
Okay, exactly. The way of how you communicate with
each
people.
person.
Yeah.
That is
Thank you.
This is how people are seated actually. So it's interesting to let them sit, and you see they sit in groups.
How do you, when you have a square table, how do you seat your parties as a mediator? Where do you want to sit? Where are you sitting?
If it's just two parties without a table. Well, actually, they turn to me like this.
What angle? Just
45, 64.
Yeah?
That's also body language.
Body language.
One of this communication that
Yeah.
you see in the, often in the beginning they talk to you.
Yeah.
Then you can see when they start talking to each other, something changes.
Yeah.
You're on a different level.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, just one place that I have to do mediations at, I hate square tables. Round is better. Because it sort of disengages that everyone's at the same level. But when I have the square table, I make them sit on the same side. No one sits on the ends, including me. And unless it's like an interpreter. I sit in the middle, but not on. So that no one feels like they have sort of an upper hand.
Okay, so the gist is that you sit, you feel that there is some balance, right?
Right, and they're facing me too.
Yeah, and that they're facing you.
Yeah, they're also next to each other.
Right, okay, very good.
And I think it also is important to remember that people process information differently, like they have different preferences. So whether it's visual communication or audio or sensory, like touch, it's important for some people.
Very good, yeah.
Even, well, as Asha pointed out, smell, you can communicate that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so fascinating. It's not even only on the active listening, what ear you're listening on, which is what we get into, but also, maybe they have other sensory type of ways of perceiving conflict or, resolving a conflict. It's excellent.
I just wanted to add to Pascal. What Pascal said, what I like about the idea of not having a table is that there's no barrier
Yeah.
between people.
Nice.
I'd like to say that visual information is very important because visual information comes first. So if you know the terminology of perception, you perceive 80%, but first visually. Then come listening. You can use also symbolic communication and also the writings because you combine all the tools of communication. When you write, you focus and you confirm. When you use visual communication or information, you use holistic perception. And when you use listening, you use the body in this part, not the brain, but is the first unconscious part of the body, and implicit knowledge. So you can combine.
Mm-hmm. And the awareness of a mediator on all of these aspects obviously will add the quality of the mediation. Yeah?
Can I just add one sentence?
Yeah.
That it's very tricky to how we understand all these signs actually. It's all nice and fine. That we read that it's 70% non-verbal communication, but how I understand, if someone is frowning, it doesn't mean that they are in the bad mood. Maybe they are thinking about something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need to be aware of that actually, that it is not easy to understand people saying openly we are trying to find the meaning under the words and so on, let alone the body signs. So.
And you judge very quickly as well. Like yesterday, for example, what's the name? Tanya, okay. Another Tanya. Okay, then you were frowning a little bit this morning and said, you seem to be troubled, but it wasn't, you were just thinking, right? Yeah, and then I thought, I could have just gone around all day and I said, she doesn't like what I say, I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. See, yeah.
Yeah, but with those facial expressions, like the problem about, trying to interpret what they're, doing, it's that it's so small and it goes so quickly. Normally it's the movement of an eye in a certain direction which can actually tell you if the person is, I don't know, lying or being shocked or scared. I read like articles about that, and so it doesn't. You should normally just look at the face, the whole body. It's easier.
Yeah, you never know. I went to a negotiation once and I was with this man. He looked incredibly grumpy for the whole time, and things went so smoothly. He said, "Yeah, I just been to the dentist. It really hurts." It was amazing.
I did a training that was organized by the FBI once on facial expressions and lying, which is really fascinating because then you discover, what's going around. But there's one thing that is also interesting, and that really was triggered by the remark that you made, is the concept of congruence. The way of sometimes people act in a different way than they look like. And then, this is the moment when you need to sort of tune a little bit more into them and see, whether they're for real, in a sense. You see what I'm saying? That it's a congruent, you're looking for congruent behavior in a conflict party.
One more point that has been mentioned, voice.
Yeah, pitch of the voice.
Yeah.
The tone, and very important, the speed. So what happens, leads me to the next slide, thank you, that's, I don't want to go too much into it, is that when you get into the conflict, what happens, people talk incredibly fast, they talk loud, they become accusatory, they generalize facts. It's terrible, isn't it? I mean, you've all been in a fight before, and it's, yeah.
But what do you do if one of those things is actually a person's habit? Because I am a fast speaker and I just speak really fast, and it really is independent of my mood. I just speak fast. So yeah, you could see it as agitation, but it's really not just me.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, but yeah.
I think in this case the congruence comes in probably.
Very good. Yeah.
If I have the feeling, oh, she doesn't really hate me, then you can speak as fast as you like. Like someone would interpret your fast speaking differently when I have the feeling, oh, she'd like to hit me, but she doesn't. She only speaks fast, she doesn't hit me.
The one thing that's important maybe for the mediator, and talking about speed, is that mediators tend to, one of the important tasks of the mediator is sometimes to decelerate a conversation. Yeah? And it's interesting because, so what happens? Yeah? You get flooded with adrenaline and all sorts of interesting hormones, in your body when you are agitated and upset. You're flooded. You can't even think straight anymore. Yeah? Takes about 20 minutes. It's like a neurobiological process. It takes 20 minutes to clear up your mind. And that's you can't always take a break. You know, most of the times maybe media says, okay, let's take a break, 20 minutes. But you know, A, you know, the clock is ticking. B, you know, some parties think, but I'm paying for this. I don't want to take a break for 20 minutes. So I got you. Yeah. And so what you do is we're doing two things this afternoon. One of them is we are working on your effective communication skills for about an hour. And then we're going to launch you into the Lufrana case. I don't know, how many of you have read the Lufrana case? Oh, good. Okay. So then I'm ready to actually assign roles as well. Which I've written down somewhere. Actually, I have two questions to start with. Hello, would you like to say Mr. yesterday?
Yeah. I don't have any
Okay. So you are Mr. Yesterday. Yeah. And I yeah, but don't read the case yet, huh? You know, you have to put it aside. Don't get excited yet. I'm going to put it aside. Even I will put it aside. I'm just trying to find a way to segue myself into barriers to effective listening. Well, let's just. What are barriers to effective listening? Let's just start it simply. We just said we concluded this session. We said what are the communications tools that we have, but somehow, sometimes we still don't get it. Yeah, all the tools you have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, prejudice.
Yeah. Okay, prejudice. You have all these things that are underneath the iceberg.
Not speaking your language.
Not speaking the language. I have my notes here. Yeah, not speaking the language. Somebody said sometimes we listen in order to respond. Yeah. We don't listen to listen, but we listen to respond.
The opposite of that is talking.
We love to hear ourselves talking. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, David, I think you have no way out now.
No.
You have
Well, I
to
don't want to.
No more.
Aren't they coming? I don't want to take this.
We will find one.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, David, where's my coffee?
Right behind you.
Oh,
With your
nice service.
Oh no!
Okay.
Wait a minute. It's not just
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. Okay. What else? Barriers to effective listening. Emotions. The flooding that we were talking about. You don't. I mean, have you been in a discussion that your ears are ringing? You're so angry. Your ears are. You have this, you know. Yeah. Maybe only women get it. I don't know.
What does that say about me?
Maybe you think you already know what the other party is saying, or
Exactly. And there's one of these classic things also that you finish the other person's sentence. Yeah. But actually that is not what that person is going to say. Yeah.
That you don't focus, you have other things in mind. You have, I don't know, time stress.
You're not here right now, as we have learned. That is a great impediment to effective listening. Mm-hmm.
You are not interested in the topic or in the...
Yeah.
And the will to express.
Yeah.
Because you are so caring about expressing so much that you don't listen.
Absolutely. And what I just noticed, actually what you were just saying, yeah, you're only interested in what you want to say, not what the other person wants to say. You want to air your stuff, right? Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
A different frame of reference for the words that are being used. For example,
Okay.
like people, my brother, he can use words to me that are really offensive, and to him are really compliment his words. So like,
Absolutely, they're pushing some sort of a button inside, in your sort of emotional framework that gives you some triggers that prevents you actually from listening, or it gives you, makes you, makes you listen
but
selectively.
it's more that the words he uses to me mean something different than to him.
Yeah.
He can actually say something like, I have no way of translating to English, but for example, he could use fat as a very positive, whereas I would be very insulted to call fat.
Yeah. And then lower your top.
Yeah, well, then you just have a really miscommunication because it's just.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes overstimulation is also an impediment to effective listening. You're just so stimulated, you're so excited, that you just don't hear things. And it happens sometimes to me when I'm in a negotiation, and you're also nervous sometimes to come into a big room with 20 people like you, and you have to listen, and I can observe myself saying, I have to listen, I have to open my ears, but I'm not really listening. It's incredible, yeah?
Also, because you are not aware, you are full of yourself, full of knowledge, but effective listening needs emptiness, in order to accept the voice of other people. You need to be empty.
Absolutely.
Being tired.
Yeah. Conflict tires you out totally. Yeah? Not only conflict, a long conference can make you very tired as well.
And
Not anymore.
Humility, so you're not your ego can stand in your way of effective listening. Why?
because you think you know more than the other teacher.
Exactly. And sometimes people, especially with a big ego, they relate everything that those conflict parties say to themselves. They think, a lot of mediators think that sometimes, that they take these things personal, or they just relate it to themselves, because you will see they have a different way of listening. Yeah?
That's a barrier.
That's a definite barrier. You don't speak clearly and loudly enough. Yeah.
But also if there's something noisy or if the environment is
background noise. Yeah, so you have to give them a safe space. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just saying language definitely again. Then one of them is one problem sometimes in effective listening, I think also or in communication, is that when actually the one party is not communicating to give information, yeah, but is seeking a confirmation of something. So there's a different goal in the communication.
It's again the ego. It's again the ego.
Yeah, it's the ego, but sometimes the parties just simply want to have a recognition of their suffering, and then the other one is, or the mediator is just seeking information, for example. There's lots of barriers like that.
Some politicians avoid the topic of conversation in that way. Many politicians, not some, but they just, as you're saying, talk something that you heard for the 100th time, and not concentrating on what needs to be talked about.
Interesting. That's a really good point. See, that this comes up. Sometimes you become immune to some types of language that you don't listen anymore. So you would need to have maybe a communications assistant, like mediator, to help you to maybe put different words on what you want to say so that the other party listens again, right? Because if A and B, if you say, I don't know, the one thing to the other party, if you've said it 100 times before that other party doesn't listen to it anymore, because they've heard it, they don't care anymore.
Or surprising somehow, but that is, if you're not in the role of mediator, you're right. I mean, I was in the role of interpreter, and I simply said, can you please answer the question, not repeat it, which is also not allowed to interpreter, but sometimes you need to surprise and say, who is she to tell me this? You know? Then
change.
But then change happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have, do you know the 4 ears? Do you know that you have more than 2 ears, but you have 4 ears?
No.
You have 4 ears, or even more than 4 ears? Yeah? Oh, somebody wanted to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think one more thing on this list might be some sort of disability, whether it's hearing or seeing or...
Excellent point. You know, like for example, some people, two things actually that we were. One of them is some people listen better on the one ear than the other. It's actually a reality, especially for people over a certain age as well. And the other thing is, some people, also from the neurobiological point of view, sometimes listen better on the left ear or on the right ear, depending on the message that you're getting. Yeah? The emotional part and the logical part are filtered through by different ears, and sometimes this is a whole other subject. But sometimes, when you listen, what side? Sometimes you listen like that. Sometimes you listen like this, right? Or some people listen more like this, and some people more like that, right? This has something to do whether you actually listen more with the emotional part of your brain or the one with the more rational part of your brain. Yeah?
And sometimes people refuse to listen because listening is a way of cooperation. Sometimes people don't want to cooperate, so they close.
Yeah, some just shut down, right? For a number of reasons, absolutely.
Yeah, just really a question maybe from your experience, whether it's disabilities where you have to have somebody who's, like I have a sign language experience is amazing, but I spent like about 15 minutes with interpreters, well there were 2, because I guess they get really tired after a while, but what you were saying as an interpreter, so how do you sort of deal with it? Because no longer are you as a mediator are in direct control. There is a reliance, almost like an extension of you, whether it be through one or multiple interpreters, especially I would assume that peace mediation, or you may have 3 or 4 in the room. How do you sort of, do you choose to maybe build a relationship with them first for a few, like for an hour, or get to know them, have a coffee, and do something so that it's not just raw, you come right into the room and boom, here you go. What's your thought?
You're asking from the role of interpreter or mediator?
No, from the mediator. Yeah, what have, maybe from your experiences where you maybe...
Yeah, I think actually there's a big lacuna there as well, because I've done maybe 3 or 4 mediations in a foreign language, or in a language that I couldn't speak, and I've learned in time that yes, it's important to have a discussion, a dialogue with them. Obviously, they try also then, they become member of that negotiation team as well. So you have to be very aware of that. At least it was the case, it's not always the case, but it was the case in the instances I've worked in. And then Antje and Georgia, and what's really, really important is that these are very special type of interpreters. And actually I would have preferred sometimes not for them not to be interpreters, but to be more language, somebody who speaks the language very well and knows how to translate very well and knows actually the whole practice of conflict resolution well. Because, for example, with some of the Russians interpreters I had to work with, I saw that they translated some of the things in a very different way, that they gave a very different connotation. So that would be my piece of advice, to actually train interpreters, on mediation, or give them the terminology and some of the key, terms and things like this. There's a lot of interesting work that could be done there. Yeah.
That is very important, because and I have to say something openly also. that I found in my region at least, that interpreters interpret in the way they would like to pass the message. So they alter the decisions, the inputs, the everything, you know, so that can be even dangerous. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes simply to please the sides and so on, but very often on purpose, I have to say, in common situations. So that is something to be taken care of. And also people who know conflict resolution field, yes, I agree that even during some film festival that was documentaries in connection to our work, one girl simply translated something like, if we don't address this conflict very soon, this land will stay frozen forever. You know, frozen conflict of course. But I understood, but there was general public in Belgrade who came to see that film, not only... There were very few of us who went.
Yeah. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do.
Okay, yesterday...
Sorry, just that, I mean, just had this maybe a light bulb moment.
Very good.
I mean, what about this? Because we talk a lot about, when we talk about training, about an international and a local trainer. I mean, what about like a facilitating, I mean, a mediation team where one person is really a local person that speaks, or that at least that it's really fluent in the language,
exactly,
so to team up, rather than having a translator. Because
absolutely.
I fully agree that they have a different job than actually to mediate.
Yeah, and make clear that this is his or her role, because sometimes somebody say, okay, you just take that person from our team and he knows the language. That's always the sort of the term. But no, you know, we actually give him a role that he's the interpreter, you know, or she. Yeah. But interpreter, which is a very specialized role within a mediation team.
You said that interpreters are special interpreters. In which terms they are special?
I mean that they're special because, you know, it's not just a translation. I mean, they're always special, you know. But I think the point I wanted to make is that they need to be very much sensitized to the actual case at hand. And that's all I was saying, that maybe that they would know that some of the terminology in a particular case has specific connotations to the different conflict parties. So a lot of precision and sensitivity is needed.
And are they also from the natural country, or they can be locals?
Yeah, I think there could be locals, but again, you know, good point, you know. Then, you know, to what extent are they partial or impartial? I think, and that's for that reason, I think there is a lacuna there that we need to address. Maybe, you know, for training in conflict resolution terminology for mediators, you know, all kinds of things you can do there. Yeah. So all those linguists in this room, I don't know how many there are, there's a special field to discover. At 10 o'clock last night, Sash said to Anna-Lara, don't you think it's late? Yeah? Okay. Don't you think it's late? Okay. What would be the ways, what do you think happened? No. Yeah, she said no. Okay, could be. What happened, Anna-Lara?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, that's an interesting communication here. Okay. He said to Anna-Lara, don't you think it's late? Okay, let me, and I was the one who got up and said, okay, and we went with Anna-Lara and we went to bed, right? We went to bed, right? I went into action. We went into action. Okay? The other thing, what else? What did you actually say?
I want you to go to bed.
Yeah. You said I want you to go into bed. Okay, I wanted to always find out what you actually meant by saying that. Okay, thank you. He could have also said that it was 10 o'clock. It was a pure and simple fact. Don't you think it's late? Yes, I think it's late. Right. He also could have, you know, and I actually, but what happened also is that I thought he was telling me that I'm not a good mother She's always up still at 10 o'clock. And then the other thing he was saying something about me. He said, what kind of a person are you? You just focus on your work. I was preparing the session yesterday, and you totally forget about putting your daughter to bed. So I went to bed very late, trying to ruminate and say, what did I say? So I basically said, okay, I'm gonna tie it down. Yeah.
I think this is funny because listen to understand is what he was saying to your daughter. So how did you get it?
Exactly. And doesn't that always happen, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that we have 4 years. We have the fact, the 10 o'clock. It was 10 o'clock. It was, what is the person trying to say about the facts? It's the self-revelation. Maybe you want to come up with that. So what is the person trying to say about him or herself? I think he was saying, if I may interpret, I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Which you did. The relationship. What is the person trying to say about the relationship? And the request and appeal. What does the person need or request? This is a German psychologist who has developed this model of the 4 years. I've been teaching and using it in all sorts of contexts, and it's actually quite revelatory, as you can say. Yeah? Because it's not only how you listen, interestingly, but it's also how you communicate. Because you listen selectively, but you also communicate selectively. Because what he wanted to say, he wanted me to have an action, and I thought he was saying something about
yourself.
Yeah, or our relationship, right? Interesting. What does this mean for a mediator? The mediators that I've worked with in the UN context often think that it's all about the facts. They need to accumulate facts, analyze the conflict, how many people died, how many tanks are there, how big is the territory, etc. Huh? So then they have to look at something else, read in between the lines. Do you think there's more years than 4 years?
Yes, we came here with Montal, with beyond just by the perception, Sometimes when you are very aware of the context of the situation and you know perfectly the way of perceiving, you hear below intuitively, and you don't use your ears.
You think that there's something that is not being said in that message?
Not only because you can perceive sometimes something is said, but you perceive what is said below.
Which is not matching what you are expressing.
Yes.
The words are not able to express what the person said. For example, if you would have that intuitive ear when I said it is 10 o'clock, okay, go and sleep. You would feel immediately intuitive ear that you want to sleep.
The idea that you wanted to sleep.
Exactly, you could have said.
I didn't want to, interesting. I did, but I didn't want to acknowledge it, Yeah.
But if I analyze your sentence, you said it's 10 o'clock. You said it's 10 o'clock. So this is also a position in your relationship, in your family, in your own emotions, in your culture, in everything, in only one sentence, I can listen many things, just these 4 words.
Yeah, there also was the feelings and the needs.
Yes.
in this message. I suggested also one.
Yes.
And weil nutritional effects is and the patients are also the feelings and needs and
Can you just see? Do you have the time there? Yeah, I need to have a. Okay. That is something I'd like to skip. You get it in the slides. Do you know the concept of looping or mirroring? Yeah?
No.
Okay. So you have two parties into a communication, the sender and the receiver. The sender sends the message. It's 10 o'clock. I summarize and see confirmation. So you think it's late? Because that's what he said. I think, don't you think it's late? Well, actually, it's not wrong. He said, don't you think it's late? How would I summarize that?
Not more like.
You think also you think it's late. Yeah. Do you think it's late? And you would say, yes.
Yes.
Hopefully. You confirm or clarify. Sometimes it's so simple. It's so simple that you just you mirror it back to the other. So that's much easier. This is maybe overcomplicating it. You mirror it back, but as neutral as possible. You're not reframing this yet. You're just mirroring it back, and all of a sudden, it decelerates a conversation already. Yeah.
Before I ask you another question, go ahead. Your comment.
Well, no, I'm not quite sure if I understand it right. I thought it was different. Like, that's why I'm looking for what were you saying? Like you say something like, you send a message, and the other one is
okay, so I'm saying, I'm very upset, I'm so angry because he's always late. Okay?
So you're so angry
You
because
said,
he's always late?
Yeah. So you're the mediator, you're standing there, and you said, you say exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And that other person, just because you say it as well, yeah, and that other person hears it, and the other party at the table hears it, changes the tone of the conversation. Isn't that fascinating? No? Yeah. Got it?
Yeah, I was sort of first thinking like it's almost like in law, like a leading question. Like I'm asking a question to you that I want to sort of.
Okay. There's the lawyers speaking.
Right.
Okay.
But it's really not. Now that you say it, it's a hybrid because it's sort of, I'm saying it to you, you're confirming it to her, and then she's coming back my way.
Exactly. So it's just to also change the dynamics and sort of the alchemy actually, in the conversation.
And in that case, I've got another question. Do you use circular questions as well in international mediation?
Yeah. Sure, we use. I mean, well, I don't know whether we all use it. I use it definitely. There's all of types of questioning types, which I wanted to discuss tomorrow as well. Hundreds of ranges of different types of questioning techniques. It's a hybrid from law and psychology and therapy. You can employ it all. Yeah.
Do you use like cross mirroring between the parties?
Yes.
Or just mirroring yourself?
No, you do also cross mirroring. So this is when you get really in the thick of it. Huh? Yeah, absolutely.
What's cross mirroring?
You want to explain?
Like, if A says, I'm very angry, blah, 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 instead of saying, you're very angry, I would say to B, what did you hear A say?
Yeah, that's like say, of course,
And then B mirrors. That's what I meant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Then, so that's the one thing. Now we get a little bit more complex in the communication. We reframe things. It's like something that we in I think our field of work we constantly do. We do it ad nauseum as well. Sometimes we overdo the reframing, that we don't see the original message anymore. Politicians are very good at reframing things.
Yes.
Like
answering to the media questions.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The messages that come to the media are often reframed. But it's hugely important to, as a communications tool, just to tell you, like in my training, I don't know how it was with you, I was Then I had my final test as a mediator. For 2 hours, they made me reframe messages. I was sweating blood almost, you know, it was really torture. It's really hard, and you need to train it. So if you want to get into this field, every day take 1 or 2 messages and try to reframe them. Yeah? How do you do that? Let's exercise it a little bit. Annelara has prepared something. Let's first look at how it works, but the basic principle is that you turn the negative into a positive. You make it at least neutral. You turn the complaint to a negotiable behavior. That's your role as a mediator. You neutralize accusatory and hurtful language. You try to take the sting out of it. Very important, you move from a focus to the past to something, a concern for the future, or at least for the present, I would say. And you encourage more constructive communication. I don't know how many are old enough to remember this organization. OPEC. Yeah? You know the cue for that? So OPEC, I use it for my reframing. I have OPEC written on my notes sometimes when I forget about it. And then I say, okay, let's not forget about, this means open. And open the communication, I'm opening the phrasing, I'm making, you know, instead of a closed statement, I'm trying to open it and make it positive. Then, this is really something I do, so you don't have to follow it, but it helps me. It's emotionally resonant, so I try to capture the emotion in the sentence. Yeah? And I make it, or one makes it concrete. As concrete and as least airy-fairy as possible. Yeah? Hardcore, so to say. Who knows about, who has done this before? Okay. Annelara, where the, okay. So, just bring forward and let make him pick one of the yellow pieces of paper. Okay. Okay, can you open it? This is the first trial first.
Okay, just because I'm Muslim, nobody understands me.
Just because I'm Muslim, nobody understands me. How would you reframe that? These are all from experiences at the table where the mediator was faced with the situation to having to reframe it.
So I would say it sounds like you're having a difficult time with people because of your religion.
Yeah? Yeah?
I would say, do you mean to say you're worried that you're not going to be understood because you're Muslim?
Okay, so you capture me an emotion now, yeah? How about reframe? You can reframe it as a question as well. Huh? Psychologists like to do that. Experience I had.
Because I understood.
Yeah.
Because I understood he was a firm indeed, so it had to be a noun.
You can. So how would you say it?
Could you repeat?
Just because I'm Muslim, nobody understands me.
I could say it. Sometimes I have the feeling that because of my religion, it's not easy.
Okay. So you reframing his message now, right? You want to give it a try, Khalid?
Yes. I guess that being or having an Islamic culture is making it harder to communicate.
Nice. Okay. You're actually recognizing who he is, yeah, and you're recognizing where he's standing. Do you feel reframed? Yeah. Okay. Another suggestion?
I would say he believes that he is misunderstood because he is a Muslim.
You believe you're misunderstood because you're Muslim?
He
What?
believes.
Yeah. No, you're the
yes.
mediator, so you're
Yeah.
speaking to, you're reframing him, right? Yeah.